This is a follow-up video to the video I made about children, which I'll link up here above. And a question is, should all people have children? And some people shouldn't have children. Some people are just not cut out for it, and those people should not have children. Okay, there are a lot of children who are born into abusive homes and neglectful homes, and that's also very sad. Those people should not have children who are ill-equipped to have children. But I would say that people who are emotionally healthy and have their shit together, they want children and they have children, if they can have them. There are people who cannot have children. There are entire websites and sites and groups dedicated to people struggling with fertility. In vitro fertilization works for some, not for others. Some people do surrogacy, or they adopt, or they just can never have children, and that exists too. But in this video specifically, I want to talk about another question that someone left, which is about single moms. And it is very difficult to be a single mom or a single dad. I have met many men that were the primary or the sole custodian of the child because the mother was incapable of being a half custodian, or she simply took off with some guy, or she had a drug issue. So it's not true that it's always the mother who gets the child. Sometimes the father gets the child. But I will say it's very difficult to raise a child by yourself. Historically, people lived in tribes, and the entire tribe was helping to raise the children. It wasn't like a nuclear family. Like, you had children and everybody raised them. There was no thing about, I'm not going to give my resources to another man's child. That did not exist. As a side note, it is a privilege to be let into the life of a child. So children are not objects that drain you of resources. Children are a gift from God, an opportunity, kind of like a beautiful flower in a garden. I would never say, oh my God, this is a flower that my neighbor planted, so I'm not going to water it. I'm just grateful that the flower gets to be in my garden. That's how I see children. They're little gifts from God. Now, as far as dating single moms, I think that can be a problem if the child has issues or the child hates you. There's nothing worse than being a step-parent to a child who hates you because that child is grieving the loss of his other parent or has some kind of issues. So that's one case where I would not want to be a step-parent. And step-parents can never replace the parent. There are different rules about how to be a step-parent, that the biological parent has to be the disciplinarian because a step-parent cannot take that role. Although there are cases where a step-parent steps in when the child is very young and the child really bonds with that step-parent and starts calling that step-parent mom or dad and becomes adopted by that parent. But I've also known cases where the child never accepted the new adult in his parent or her parent's life and was very jealous and caused a lot of problems in the relationship. So getting into relationships with people with children can be tricky because when you break up, you lose access to those children. And I've known people who were emotionally devastated when these children were ripped out of their lives because the relationship with that parent ended. More on single moms. It's very difficult to be a single parent. It's very difficult to be a parent anyway. And being a single parent is extra hard. And often people divorce and they have co-parenting arrangements, which is good. But you miss your child on the days you don't have them. There are also cases where women just simply had casual sex with men and the men are just Casanovas. This is very common, unfortunately, in the African American community, where more related to poverty, actually. And those are cases related to poverty where the women are not using birth control or they're just not being very choosy about the men that they're having sex with. But there are also many single moms who did a very good job raising their children. I know of some single moms who worked and went to school to get a degree and were raising their children, and their children turned out just fine. It just makes it a lot harder. I think that ideally, when people have young children, ideally they have family around to help them with the kids sometimes, because you need a break. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, siblings, it just helps. Raising children alone with a spouse, it's just tough. So those are my thoughts on single parents. If you don't want to date a single parent, that's fine. You don't have to date a single parent. You don't. But I know men who have no kids who dated a mom with kids. Like if you look at Kyle and Crystal Ball and her husband Kyle, he has no kids of his own and she has 3, and he married her. Not for her money, but because he has his own too, and I'm sure he could have gotten somebody super hot anyway. But that's one case. I know other cases as well, not just that one, of people that I know in my personal life where the man had no children, but he fell in love with the woman, and he's not a simp. He's a masculine man, and he fell in love with the woman who has kids, but the guy also liked kids. He just didn't have any of his own yet. So that's a complicated topic. I think that kids do complicate a relationship. When you have children, you actually give up a lot of your own personal time with your spouse, with your hobbies, with your work, because they're a great sacrifice and a great privilege, and they will disrupt your life and make you a better person. Those are my thoughts on kids. Again, if you don't want kids, don't have them. If you hate kids, go watch another channel. There are lots of channels out there from women who don't want kids ever, and they have channels. There are YouTube channels about this. Maybe those of you who are mad at me for being pro kids, I would invite you to go watch some of those other channels, because there are people who don't want kids and they have channels and they're proud of it. I will just say that birth control has artificially altered, our ability to have sex and to have sex without having children. So that's kind of a new thing in human life. But before birth control, having sex always brought with it the risk of children. And it's good that we have birth control, but it does remove us a lot from our biology and our animal spirits, in that intercourse without a condom, it did involve the risk of pregnancy, and people would make choices around their fertility, when they would have sex or not have sex. So if you want to be true to nature, you would not have intercourse on the days that a woman is fertile. And that way you would be living in accord with nature of a person who doesn't want children. That's fine. Some people shouldn't have kids, and now those people actually have a choice. But unfortunately, you hear about these moms, the true crime, their kid was unalived by the boyfriend, or you hear about cases like Chris Watts, and some kids go through terrible abuse. And I really think that some people who had really bad childhoods or who hated their moms or their dads don't want to have children. One more thing I'll say, if you don't want children, you probably haven't gotten to this point in the video. I should probably make a separate video, but one exercise that I really recommend is taking a photo of yourself as a baby or as a toddler and just putting it out and loving that little baby inside of you. And you still may not want to have kids, but it's gonna not make you hate them so much. I think that someone left a comment and I agree with it. I think that people who hate kids have some unresolved negative experiences from their own childhood, where they hated themselves or the way they were treated, or their parent was just a nasty parent. And my mom was always a very loving mom, and I always, from that is how I wanted to also be a mom, because I saw that modeled and I was loved as a child. But if I hadn't been loved as a child, or my mom was nasty, I could see that I wouldn't want to have kids, because I'd never seen it as a beautiful thing, you know? So, but in general, just taking a picture of yourself and loving yourself as however you looked in that picture, you know, I think that's a very heartwarming exercise for anyone. And thank you for watching my video.